Welcome back to the Critical Care podcast from Shephard Studio in partnership with Collins Aerospace. In this final episode of our current series, we explore what comes next. Across the last 2 episodes, we've seen what embedded forward-leaning sustainment looks like in Heidelberg and with the Royal Netherlands Air Force. But what happens when you apply those lessons to the next generation of platforms? This episode looks to the future at digital engineering, predictive maintenance, and the new strategic role of sustainment across NATO and allied operations. We begin with a simple but powerful shift, designing with sustainment in mind. Chris Norris, the Director of Avionics Military Services Programme Management from Collins Aerospace and leads the embedded support team in the Netherlands, opens with a practical insight.
To me, it's really about moving our customers from individual customized solutions to open architecture solutions, right? Common hardware solutions, common software solutions. Imagine what it would do for the U.S. military if every display on every aircraft is exactly the same display. They could hot swap displays off any aircraft with a simple software update and keep aircraft running.
And getting there means binding together engineering, logistics, operations, and maintenance into a cohesive support system.
I look at things like from a customer perspective, how do we help the customer move into the next generation, right? Meaning, how do we help them reduce the number of returns? How do we help them reduce no-fault founds? How do we help them get access to our data quicker? How do we help them keep their aircraft up more often, right?
For Collins Aerospace, sustainment isn't just about fixing what breaks. It's about anticipating what's needed and engineering support into every step of the process. We hear first from Marc Harrington, the Associate Director of the Fighter, Trainer and Bomber Sustainment Program Management Team at Collins Aerospace.
They get an organic capability, so they get a little more control over their destiny, a little more predictability. We scratch that itch if they really think they need to have, I want to make sure that these parts are always working or that if I can control my budget. Typically, though, it's not a less expensive solution. It's a more predictable solution. So eyes wide open, we'll give them the full package and say, okay, here's your cost benefit of doing what you want to do. Or there's other offerings, right? So we've got everything from power by the hour to predictability to fill rate type programs. Or again, back to the, hey, I know I'm going to send in 30 of these things a month to get repaired because I've got a fleet of 500 planes and the mean time between failure is X, and I'm going to have between 25 and 30 of these repaired every month, which is more like an IDIQ. So it's very predictable.
This is Michael Nelson, Director of Military Service Operations.
I think the sustainment and what it looks like is relative to the customer demand, the environment, and then what it comes down to is the governmental funding, right? The budgets. They kind of dictate what we can do from a sustainment standpoint, in my mind. So if I look back when I started with Collins, we had service centers in a lot of regions. And over time, we've reduced those based on demand, based on funding, etc. And now it's like we're kind of going back that way, but a little different. Because I think the approach now is probably more creative, where before it was just put up brick and mortar and add capacity, add, people, etc. Our approach is more of a partnership with our customers that I think in the long term probably gives us better ability to sustain things longer because there's that joint investment. As that is evolved, the warfighter is looking for that quick response. How do you keep me mission ready all the time? Putting it as close to those regions where those items are used is probably a different thought process than before. It feels to me like it's more emphasis on how do we better serve the warfighter and how are we more responsive? That's kind of how I see how it's evolved from my perspective.
That early intentional investment is shifting how sustainment is seen, not as an afterthought, but as a fundamental element of system design. Mike Yunker, the leader for avionics military aftermarket business development, agrees. For him, the biggest shift is when sustainment becomes part of the acquisition conversation from the start.
Industry's always been reactive based on the needs of the customer. So before there was a lot of organic, like the military would have their own sustainment plans. They would try to do all the work in-house. Then as you know, the dollars got lean, they had to look for better ways to do stuff. So then they bring industry in to create some of these partnerships. And that's where we have been. And that's where we're going towards again. I think it's important to note here that also during those times, it was always about buying the stuff and not so much about sustaining the stuff. I know that's kind of counterintuitive to my first point, but we also seen over the years of now that's more important is when a customer goes to buy a monitor up front, they're looking at what it's going to cost to sustain that tail. Whereas before it was I'm just buying the monitor and that's somebody else's problem to deal with the sustainment. Now they're looking at it together, which is great. And I think this is where we help our team, where we add value, right? That our capabilities and our services add tremendous value to the customer. So they know about that upfront vice. Somebody buying it gets handed over the fence to them. And then they realize, hey, well, what's the warranty? Well, I don't know. That's your problem now, right? Having all those conversations up front. So I think to bring it back home is sustainment's really integrated now into the acquisition process where before it was very separate. And I think that's part of the changes, and we're going to continue to see those changes going forward.
Predictive maintenance is often described as the holy grail of sustainment, spotting issues before they become problems.
And we have real-time access to data. Customers have real-time access to that data. We have automated test solutions. We can gather and track and trend and analyze data in real time and provide better insight to the customers as to what we're seeing, help them fix things in the field before they break and come in. We can provide them proactive solutions and service bulletins based on the trending that we're seeing. And just, I'll say, again, kind of the move towards automation, the move towards AI, the move towards the analytics and the trending and the real-time data of our customers has really been game-changing for everybody.
It's a shift enabled by automation, but powered by access. To make predictions, you need real data in real time.
From an on-site perspective, we have options to put our service engineering folks on site with our customers, right? So what that really does is provides immediate reach back for our customer into the Collins kind of global infrastructure and knowledge, really reduces their downtime and increases their availability. The biggest thing we find by putting service engineering on site is that time that it takes to reach back into the information that the customer needs to be able to solve whatever issue they have, especially globally. When you think through the world as it is today from a global trade perspective, one of the longest lead time items for our customers is getting access to the knowledge and the intellectual property they need from Collins to be able to fix their assets. When we have somebody on site, we've already got all of that intellectual property kind of pre-placed. We have all of the right approvals and justifications in place for them to immediately access that information and immediately resolve their issue and get their aircraft flying again.
The demand, right? That's a big one. So it's a continuous effort of evolving how we process things. You know, how can we leverage AI? How can we leverage new technology? Which in a production environment, that is probably a little easier where, as you know, a lot of the stuff that we repair is 40-year-old equipment. So there's not always a quick solution. So you have to be innovative and you have to figure out ways to leverage the new technology and how can we incorporate it into our processes, whether it be test equipment, troubleshooting aids, the data analysis part, like Chris mentioned very early on. How do we leverage all those things to continually enhance our process to be quicker? We continuously leverage core methodology to constantly look at how we can reduce time to better support the customer. And that's a collaboration between Chris's group and Marc, Mike, the service engineers. We leverage all those different folks when we do those events to get different perspective. And as we mentioned, again, to tie back to, you've got all these folks that are various backgrounds, various years of experience. A lot of times they can give insight that helps us look at it differently and find a new way to process or a different technique maybe, or a different approach so that we can do a better job quicker with the repairs.
That predictability is powered by deep systems knowledge and local capability. Because if you can see what's coming, you can act before it hits.
From my perspective, it's really, we have to move the customers towards this, I'll say, commercial common products and services, right? So go back even a couple of years ago, even today, we're still working off, hey, I have an aircraft. I need a very specific display to go in that aircraft. It's customized to that very specific customer. We internally are trying to design and market common products. Think of open systems architecture, right? So we have a display that meets 99% of what customers need. We need to move our customers towards those products. So it reduces everybody's investment costs. It reduces everybody's sustainment costs. It allows for a much quicker return from a repair perspective, because again, we can buy all the same test equipment. We have all the techs trained up on the same products. We can create open pools for customers and do exchanges.
Common systems mean faster fixes, fewer surprises, and more reliable operations across fleets and partners.
For my part of the operation, I see that evolving to probably more card level type repairs, and the skill set needed for service probably leans more towards service engineering types. And you're going to have probably less people-to-people interaction, more over the phone. Here's what I need. With the open architecture, potentially it's a simple software solution. So I think for our capability, it's going to evolve to, a changing skill set needed with how we interact with the customer. I think more automation on the front and back end of our process, where we significantly probably reduce some of the labor. If you would kind of operate like a cell phone type industry, where retail, where, you got a number you call for service help, and we address a certain percentage of solutions that way, we will always have some level of the repair type stuff we do today. But I think it'll become less as things evolve technology wise. Our process will change. How we support the customer will change. Potentially the service center footprint becomes smaller as far as real estate needed, because you're doing a different type of support.
The future of sustainment doesn't just depend on new tools, it depends on old knowledge. At Collins Aerospace, expertise is measured not just in certifications, but in decades.
It's really a brain trust, right? So the more experience you get, the more valuable you are. So going through the cycles, the customer cycles of, hey, the customer has a need, you answer that need, you quote it, you negotiate it, you put it in place, you manage it. You have to live through it, right? You have to experience it. You have to have some successes. You have to have some failures, because you're not going to win everything. And winning isn't just getting something signed, right? We're not interested in signing up for a bad deal or for a deal where the customer feels like it's a bad deal for them. It really is a win-win solution at the end of the day.
That continuity shapes not only how Collins operates, but also how it shows up for the customer.
I think what makes this organization and Collins unique is our longstanding employees, right? We don't have a lot of turnover in the organization because people take ownership and pride in what they do, and they take ownership and pride in serving our military customers. We hire a lot of folks out of the military. So when you look at the specific job roles, when you look at our service engineering organization, over 50% of that organization, I think actually closer to 75% of that organization, is retired military. And so we're hiring those folks for not only their experience, their technical experience, but their experience with the customer that they're going to serve. So they bring that voice of the customer into the organization. They've been there, they've been that person, and they know exactly how to support the end customer.
And it's not just a technical advantage, it's a cultural one.
I think the employees with long-serving experience are vital to our success, especially with the service centers. And I'm going to go back to how much time it can save us. Again, when you're talking quick turnarounds, cycle time, those folks are instrumental in saving us from having to go up the learning curve over and over. we've got techs that have been with the organization for 40 plus years. So that's a lot of knowledge on legacy equipment that can save us time. And also we benefit from them when we bring on new people with them sharing that knowledge. So it just broadens our knowledge base, if you would, with some of that experience. The one thing that does stand out when you look at the domestic sites versus Heidelberg, for example, what I've seen there is likewise, they try to hire former military folks as well. The culture difference, when they go into a role or a job, they plan to do that for life. The stability there is strong from that aspect. There's probably more long-serving employees there versus all of our domestic sites. How do we leverage that facility to better serve that region? It gives you a lot of confidence going into it.
That blend of deep experience and frontline understanding turns sustainment from a service contract into something more lasting, a genuine partnership. With technology accelerating and geopolitical demands increasing, sustainment systems face more pressure than ever. For Collins Aerospace, the question isn't just how to keep pace, but how to stay ahead.
Something that we're trying out right now, which is augmented reality goggles. So we can have a service engineer here in Cedar Rapids, and we can have a customer in the middle of anywhere around the world, and they can both put on augmented reality goggles, and they can see what each other is doing. And the engineer here can help try to troubleshoot something on an aircraft where we can't physically get somebody there for 48 hours or 72 hours. We can do that kind of thing in real time. It's all about analytics these days, right? So how do we get systems upgraded so that we are getting predictive analytics out of the systems, not only us, but how do we connect our systems with our customer systems so that we can have real-time data access and flow back and forth between the two of us to help us provide even faster and I'll say better predictive analytics. How can we help the customer forecast their demands? So that's something that we're trying to do with DLA. For example, we have access to some of their data, their usage data, and trying to help them proactively predict what they're going to need in the future so they can get orders placed in time for lead times to be able to have things when they need them versus always kind of being in the rears.
Real-time collaboration driven by AI and automation is no longer future-facing. It's becoming the new norm. And the shift isn't just technological, it's contractual, it's cultural.
So speed, everything's about speed, right? Commerciality side of it shortens that distance from, hey, I've got a need to, hey, I'm on contract and now I'm performing to something. If you do a FAR 15, so a federal acquisition regulation, all, TINA compliant, and it's a full negotiation, it could take you at least 6 months, right? That's a perfect world. 180 days to get a submission. You do a fact finding for about 180 days. And then sometime in the future, you're going to go to negotiation and then finally close it. It could easily be a year and a half before start to finish on a renewal. So we're not even talking about new aircraft. Here's all the requirements. Let's go figure this out. Commerciality, realistically, should be done in about 3 or 4 months because you've got the need. Here's what we're going to provide you. Do you see any holes? Nope. Okay. Or here's a few things we're going to sprinkle in there. And then you negotiate and execute. That's really where the future is going. And I believe that our company is probably going to a situation where everything is commercial from the product line, unless there is a specific kind of an investment by the government that says, hey, this has got to be controlled, whatever. But it's just so inefficient to do that. I think the future is going to have to be this commercial model just because of the efficiencies that it brings.
Yeah, I would say from my view, from a business development world, I think the future kind of looks like we almost give them a digital menu of what we can do. We're doing a good job of speed of need. Marc was just talking about some contracting examples that we think that the government's going to, as well as industry, where there's almost like a fast lane for certain acquisitions and certain programs to cut down on all the red tape. So, we highlighted the commerciality aspect there. And I would just kind of say the last thing is maybe more interactive. Chris mentioned the AI, have an artisan on the ground and somebody back in a lab. We started experimenting that when I was still in the Navy, a product called Mezzanine, where you could do that, where you could put a headset on and kind of look at that stuff. So I think you're going to get a lot more of that as well, right? So I think that might be baked into some of the future requirements capabilities. That, hey, do you have an AI or some type of platform that is part of the package, so we can put on a set of goggles, you put them on, and then we can troubleshoot.
From integrated sustainment to embedded engineers, from predictive diagnostics to shared NATO repair models, a new sustainment mindset is taking shape. It's one where operators, engineers, and OEMs are not just sharing responsibilities, they're shaping the future together. That's the story of critical care. Thanks for listening.